Well, the winds are finally dying down tonight after they really scoured the eastern plains all day. Certainly made for an anxious afternoon in the foothills and on the Front Range as Coloradans waited out high fire danger alerts. 3 years to the day since the start of the most destructive fire in state history. The National Weather Service let a high wind warning expire about an hour ago. That was the heads up for gusts 50 to 60 miles per hour, even stronger in the high country and the foothills. Those winds, along with relatively low relative humidity, brought out red flag warnings along the I-25 corridor and out into southeastern Colorado today. Xcel Energy chose not to preemptively shut off power in fire-prone areas today. The company, of course, got some blowback after they cut off power to 55,000 customers across 6 counties back in April. In some cases, it took days to restore that power. The company called it a public safety power shutoff. Xcel says those will become more common under their new wildfire mitigation plan. Xcel told us that the winds today were much milder than the 100-mile-per-hour gusts that prompted those preemptive blackouts. They said today they just turned up the sensitivity on their power lines. They'd shut off more quickly if there was an issue, and they sent workers out to visually inspect the lines when there were outages. Let's bring in meteorologist Kathy Sabin for a look at where the winds stand now. Kathy?
Oh, boy, it's great that everybody's being prepared. I think all of us just kind of held our breath today because fire danger is something we think about every day, every month out of the year, and especially on the anniversary like this one of the Marshall Fire. Not entirely calm out there, but the winds are starting to come down. After a day with 75 and 80-mile-per-hour gusts, 80 at Brainerd Lake, Copper Mountain. Imagine skiing and snowboarding with a gust of 75, 50, 60, 70-mile-per-hour gusts along the Front Range and Eastern Plains, creating airport delays and areas of blowing snow. And it's still not entirely calm out there, but the high wind warning has canceled and the red flag warning for Denver has canceled. We're monitoring traffic and travel on I-70 right now, much improved after poor visibility, whiteout conditions. And now we're watching the temperatures fall a whole lot colder in the mid-30s this hour, and we're headed into the mid-teens overnight. But what about the New Year's holiday? I'll have the timing and impact of that coming up.
Winds stronger than today's were whipping on this date 3 years ago when the Marshall Fire started in Boulder County. When it was all over, 2 Coloradans had lost their lives and 1,000 had lost their homes. It took 2 years for investigators to determine the likely cause of that fire. They found 2 ignition points merged to become one massive fire. Investigators say one of the fires started on a property owned by the religious group 12 Tribes. The other ignition source was likely a damaged Xcel power line. Xcel disputes that. The company's fighting a lawsuit from thousands of Coloradans and local governments and insurance companies. The recovery process has been slow going for some of the neighbors who lost their homes. The state says about 60% of the impacted households have finished rebuilding and they have returned home. Nearly 200 families will not return. The state says they have either sold their properties or are trying to sell. For 3 years, our Angeline McCall has walked that long road to recovery alongside the Chavez family of Old Town Superior.
Even as time has passed, some of the feelings have stayed.
3 years ago, can you believe that? Still makes you cry.
Ted Chavez lost his house in Old Town Superior. So did his mom, sister, aunt, and uncle. A family that's been generations in the same place.
I don't choke up as bad as I used to. You know, it's funny how 3 years later you're still thinking what you lost.
After rebuilding his home, he's almost done with an ADU with an attached garage.
You just go one day at a time. That's what we've been doing.
Building a new house came with another chapter that he didn't want either. Ted had to say goodbye to his mom, Elsie, after she passed away from a car accident.
It just angers me that she only lived in her house for, I think it was a half a year. And then I retired, and she lived 4 months after when I retired, you know, and I wanted to spend more time, but.
A new year, this same day, with similar weather, brings fear that's hard to relive.
That's one of the things we don't like talking about, because it brings the emotions back out. If it wasn't for that wind that day, we would still be fine.
After so many changes he never wanted, he can reflect what he can change, what's in the next chapter.
Big time changes. Very emotional. I think, though, patience was my biggest change. I couldn't fight it. You can't fight to win. You got to be patient to win. And it was tough. 3 years later, I'm in a happy place.
At one point, Ted told me he actually felt like maybe it was the wrong decision to rebuild as they were going through all of the process and the stress and the struggles that come with it. He said now that it's built, he's happy he went through with it, but if he were ever to go through something like this again, he said that he would think twice.
That's so hard, right? Because there have to be the challenges that they expect to face, the challenges that they don't expect to face, and then, as you noted, a lot happens in a family in 3 years. Nothing is ever static over that kind of time.
No, exactly. And so something that happened too is like his uncle sold the property, Elsie died. You know, there are a lot of struggles with the cost of supplies and materials, had a lot of setbacks with contractors, for instance. And so this was a very long road to get here. And even though it's a happy moment, it's also one filled with a lot of other feelings too. Yeah, it's bittersweet. We appreciate the fact that they have allowed you and therefore the rest of us kind of walk with them through the journey so that people don't forget that families are in this situation. Angeline, thank you very much. If a public hearing about public meeting law happens on a day when most of the public is still in holiday mode, was it intentionally scheduled to avoid the public? State legislators limited the public's right to see their communications this year. That was a bill that came with a requirement to hold an annual meeting to gather public feedback. And it just happened to be scheduled for the dead zone between Christmas and New Year's. But you know what? Word got out. Politics guy Marshall Zellinger was there.
I'm really pleased to see the number of people here with us today.
To be fair, committee hearings during the legislative session are sometimes sparsely attended.
The insult today is this meeting itself and the time at which it was scheduled.
This hearing on the Monday between Christmas and New Year's is a meeting that had to happen by tomorrow.
It is not my intention to make a meeting about open meetings law difficult for people to participate in.
The hearing was a requirement in an open meetings bill that the legislature passed this year, which actually exempts when state lawmakers are bound by the state's open meetings laws. For instance, electronic communication between lawmakers does not require a public meeting notice, but the communication itself is considered a public record, on the off chance the public even knows about it.
While it may let lawmakers work more efficiently, the public may be less trustful and supportive of the outcome if they're not included.
You're seeing video of this committee hearing because we went with a camera. Otherwise, it would have looked like this.
The bottom line, legislative audio is antiquated and should be replaced by streaming committee meetings at this point.
Senate will come to order.
The only video the legislature allows to be streamed is what happens on the House and Senate floor. Colorado and Maine are the only two states that do not provide video streams of committee hearings. Not that Bart Miller and the Colorado Channel Authority Board haven't tried.
You have cameras in all the committee rooms now, but under Colorado law, we can't do that without the executive committee's approval. Each year, we have sent a letter to the executive committee requesting you consider this. Our board has never received a response to these letters.
This is what it might look like if these meetings were streamed. This is what people see when they testify remotely.
Apparently, the estimate is an additional $28,000.
If it really is that inexpensive, there's no reason why we wouldn't.
What's $28,000 in a state that has to cut, $500 million? In the age of streaming, it's amazing that the Colorado legislature is not even cable sometimes, but rather AM/FM radio. I remember when remote participation started during COVID, and I asked for permission to access a Zoom meeting committee hearing, and I wasn't allowed. I know this meeting today was about the concerns of exempting state lawmakers from certain open meetings laws, Kyles, but that part about the infrastructure is pretty much there, but there's been no response. That was eye-opening to hear. Like, hey, you got the cameras, but you've never told us if it's okay to use them.
Right. If you got 48 states that do it, and we're one of 2 states that doesn't do it, you would expect that there would be a really good reason for why we don't do it, other than like, well, we haven't responded to the guy's letters for 6 years asking to turn on the cameras.
According to Senate Minority Leader Paul Lundeen, who's leaving the legislature because he's termed out, he said something to the effect of like, are we going to add to the government by having to pay more to oversee the government? He wasn't so sold on it. He needed firm numbers. And again, that estimate was just an estimate, like $28,000 for like a part-time employee for part of the year to run the cameras.
As we well know, sometimes the people that are elected by the public beclown themselves in those hearings.
You like that word?
I do like that word. And I don't know, maybe they should beclown themselves on camera. Marshall, thank you. Your microgiving kept up through the holidays. Of course it did. I'm here to thank you for the more than $30,000 that you raised for a pediatric clinic in the metro area that serves kids in foster care. $30,000 plus. That counts the one-time weekly donations to the nonprofit Kemp Center, as well as your monthly donations to the Word of Thanks Fund that then get split equally among all the nonprofits that we feature. You are now approaching $14 million in microgiving. $5 donations add up fast. If you know of a nonprofit anywhere in Colorado that is doing good work and could use our help, email me. Next@9news.com is the email. You can text NEXT at 303-871-1491. It is one of your next questions that has us taking a closer look at why only some Coloradans have to abide by emissions tests for their vehicles.
There's only one thing we can do to get this money. I've got to go talk to President Carter.
And the story of how a former president got personally invested in making a park happen in Denver. And a word about how to fairly judge Jimmy Carter's legacy. Next. Tonight's next question comes from a viewer named Jay in Winter Park, wondering why only drivers in the Denver metro area in the Northern Front Range have to get their vehicle emissions tested. Jay asks, should the whole state be chipping in to curb air pollution? Well, Jay, you could hold your breath based on air quality, but I would not hold your breath for an expansion of emissions testing anytime soon. So Colorado began requiring drivers to get those tests in high pollution areas in the 1990s. That was to comply with federal standards. So this is only the Denver metro area, parts of the Northern Front Range. EnviroTest, the private company that oversees the state testing sites, is barely able to keep up with demand in those counties, much less expanding it. Earlier this year, one of their reps told state legislators the program doesn't have enough money to modernize their existing test sites or expand them anywhere.
We need to purchase more remote sensing devices and get them further out away from the metro area. This all takes resources. We've had no fee increase since 1993 when the first statute was passed at $25. If you were to track inflation, that test should be $55.
Thanks to Marshall, we know there's a camera in that room. They just didn't turn it on and stream it to you, so we have to just listen to the audio. The folks who oversee regional air quality are considering bumping that test price up to $35. That does not signal that they're going to be expanding the geographic reach of the program. That money would likely go to expanding existing sites within the current footprint or developing some new self-testing kiosks.
An active weather pattern, but not a lot of moisture. This progressive northwest flow transporting in a lot of wind, and then the cold will come tonight, but not a lot of moisture. The snow showers tapering off, which is great news for travelers dealing with whiteout conditions, winter weather, and travel advisories all day. The winds in Denver finally starting to decrease, but are not entirely calm, even with a high wind warning and red flag warning now canceled. We topped out in the upper 40s today. We'll be 10 degrees colder tomorrow with the passage of today's weather system. Already, we're down to 35 degrees. Overnight lows are headed into the teens. It's going to be a chilly night with lighter winds and clear skies. Mountain snow showers tapering off. We get a sunny day tomorrow, a calmer day tomorrow with less wind. All good news there. New Year's Day will be cool but dry with highs in the lower 40s. Slow warming trend heading into the weekend. A little cooler with maybe an isolated shower when the Broncos take the field on Sunday afternoon.
An elected representative in Colorado marked Jimmy Carter's death with celebration and then an apology. And a word about how we might best judge the legacy Carter leaves behind here in Colorado and around the world. A Republican state rep from the Western Slope is apologizing for saying he was celebrating the death of former President Jimmy Carter with champagne. Representative Matt Soper from Delta called Carter a despot, basically a tyrannical ruler. When we asked Soper if he would be kind enough to explain that and the celebration, he declined. He did say he was sorry. He posted about his champagne toast to Jimmy Carter's death on X, saying that Carter was the worst president in American history and that he, quote unquote, destroyed the U.S. Representative Soper told me today that his post was in poor taste and that he is very sorry. Soper has a history of posting incendiary claims online and then apologizing. Last year, he apologized for calling Colorado Democrats tyrants and telling them to prepare for civil war over gun control. You can see Jimmy Carter's work in Colorado in the Habitat for Humanity homes that he helped build in Denver's Globeville neighborhood in 2013. You can see it in a memorial park that he personally helped get funded. Babi Yar Park in Denver is a memorial to the Jews and Ukrainians murdered by Nazis in Ukraine's Babi Yar Ravine in World War II. Carter helped to make that park a reality in 1978 when the head of the Park Foundation went to Washington to meet with the president and ask him for funds. Helen Ginsberg says she landed the meeting because she wrote Carter a long-shot letter with the request. She met him in June and left with $178,000 to finish the park. We spoke to Ginsberg last year when Jimmy Carter entered hospice care.
A big envelope stuffed with information, and I said to Mr. President, I may have forgotten something, but everything's in here if you want to read it when you have time sometime. And he took it and put it down. He said, you've told me enough that I was going to fund this for you. And that put the project over the top and endeared that man to me for the rest of my life. When I heard he was passing on his way, it struck me hard.
Ginsberg says she invited Carter to come to Denver for the park's dedication in 1983, but he said he couldn't attend. He sent a letter with his regrets. It's inevitable that a president will be remembered by what they do in office. Jimmy Carter's life and its impact suggest that we might want to put additional emphasis on how our presidents get there and then what they do when they leave office. It'll be the work of historians to debate whether Jimmy Carter effectively dealt with the crises of his term as president. The entirety of his life, though, offers lessons in how to be of steadfast service to others at any age, and whether you happen to be the most powerful person in the world or not. Jimmy Carter was an American patriot from his youth to his old age. He didn't dodge the draft. He served. He loved his country when he won elections and even when he lost. Jimmy Carter was a man of faith, longtime Sunday school teacher. He'd read the book. He lived its teachings. Jimmy Carter was a faithful and loving husband. He'd tell people that Rosalind saying that she would marry him was a more exciting moment in his life than when he won the presidency or won the Nobel Peace Prize. Jimmy Carter was a humanitarian. He poured decades of his life into solving unglamorous but serious problems around the world, like guinea worm and river blindness. Jimmy Carter led by example. He became the most famous volunteer for Habitat for Humanity, building or repairing more than 4,000 homes over 35 years, including a bunch here in Denver. Jimmy Carter was a decent and dignified man. You don't have to be one of those to succeed in politics, which makes his remarkable life all the more worthy of our respect and remembrance. We're back with your feedback next. We finish, as always, with your feedback. Jackie says, will the Mile High drone show happen tonight due to the high winds? Yes, Jackie, what's going off tonight at 5:30, last one of the season. Who was able to catch that tradition? My girls saw it. They absolutely loved it. So I'm going to try to go with them next year. Apparently, it's kind of a cool little new tradition in our area. Tom writes, I loved your neologism, be clown. I will make good use of it during the upcoming session of the U.S. Congress. Tom, I have to admit, I had to look up the word neologism, which is ironic because it means a new word, phrase, or meaning that's become part of mainstream language. Any night that I learn something new here is a good night. See you next time.